pushed my meeting back so I could be here. I don't even know what you're presenting, but I've got a bunch of negative stuff written up, ready to go.
Awesome, awesome. I look forward to it.
All right, so with that, let's call it a meeting. We've got the promise of Smack Talk from Christian recorded. This is the April meeting of the Utah Microsoft Users Group. We're glad that you're here either in person or watching later live on YouTube. We have a tiny group this month. Maybe that's because they saw that I had the possibility of presenting, and I put myself after Christian leaves, so I get no harassment from CBUC.
I think we've tripled the amount of people in the room.
We have tripled the amount. Yep.
There's 3 of us now.
There are 3, and I will take this opportunity to once again say that next month in May, we're going to meet again, as they say, come hell or high water. And so 2 things about the May meeting. Thing 1, we'd love to get topic suggestions. So if there's something that you want Brent to teach us, send that topic suggestion in, info@utsharepoint.org, or find me on Twitter and tell me what it is you want us to show you, and we'll find someone that can show you that. Otherwise, we'll do another month of lightning talks. The second thing is, I wanted to thank Journey Team for ponying up this room. They make this space available to us every month, and I will say, especially the 2 of you, and you know this, because this is where you live, Josh, there's soda and candy just next door.
Oh, all right. Well, if I disappear in the middle of the presentation, that might be where
That's right. You've got, and I happen to know that nobody guards the candy room.
From personal experience.
I would never talk about. So feel free to join us next month when we have the meeting. So we have 4 potential presenters. Josh is going to start out by showing us a very much works in progress project that he said to me may or may not work when we get to the actual meeting. Rusty will show us some fun stuff that he is doing. And then we have from Zach, Yesh, who is going to show us a bot made in Teams. And I'm excited to see if that's something that I might be able to use to automate my day job. So I'll be paying attention to that. And if we get to the end and we've not all gone to sleep and there's still interest, I'll show you a Power Automate script that I have done. And so for those that are presenting, we're looking for 10 or 15 minutes. If there are questions, we won't hold it against you if you go over.
Okay.
If eyes glaze over and Noah's head hits the desk, then we'll move on to the next presenter.
So many people have turned their cameras off already is because they're already asleep.
They're already
presentation
already head on the desk. And let's start each presentation by introducing yourself.
Okay.
And if necessary, telling us that whatever you say is your opinion and not representative of any company that you work for. Then describe your project, give us the show and tell. We'll take questions, then move on to the next presenter. Sound fair?
Okay.
You're up.
All right, so I guess first question is, can you guys hear me okay through the big screen up there, or should I turn on my microphone on my computer here?
Gotcha.
Got me okay? All right. I was kind of hoping to have 2 screens here so that I could have the notes on one and do the presentation on the other, but I've only got the 1 screen, so if you guys see my notes, I apologize. Try and do a screen share here. Okay, so I guess the first question that I have for everybody, and this can be interactive or just one of those I ask a question and everybody nods their heads, either one I'm fine with. Who here remembers Delve? Got a couple of hands in the room. Can't see anybody on the big screen anymore, so I don't actually know how that's. Is there a way to...
It's still there. I just looked at it yesterday.
Is it still there, really?
Yes, it is.
Oh my goodness. Well, I thought that thing had gone the way of the dodo, but apparently not. That's okay. That's fine.
All right. I'll stop fiddling with it. Oh, look down here in the corner.
So, do I need to go over? Is there anybody who doesn't remember Delve? I guess might be a better question. Anybody who wants a quick refresher on what it is?
Do a refresher for the YouTube.
Either that or we can tell YouTube to pause the recording and go hit Google.
There you go. Go find no Bing. This is a Microsoft presentation.
You can Google that on Bing.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so really short version is Delve was marketed as this idea that it was going to look at everything that that Microsoft had for you across all of their products. So it was going to look at your Outlook emails. It was going to look at your Word documents. It was going to look at your SharePoint lists and libraries. It was going to look at your calendar meetings in Outlook. Anything that Microsoft had that was about you, it was going to put all of that information together. Then it was going to kind of present you a task list for the day, or reminders for the day, or a way to organize your day, kind of a thing, based off of all the information that it had about you. And for whatever reason, that didn't really take off very well. I honestly thought it was dead. Apparently, Christian says that it still exists, so we'll trust Christian's word over mine on that one. But the technology that powered Delve is a little bit more what we're interested in today. They didn't talk about that too much when they first introduced Delve, but the technology that kind of powers it is what they call the Microsoft Graph. And that's this sort of back-end API service, I guess you could call it, that allows you to look at all of those different things, right? It allows you to look at a user's email. It allows you to look at a user's calendars. It allows you to look at a user's SharePoint documents, lists and libraries, conversations that they've had in Teams, those kind of things. All of that stuff is stored on Microsoft servers. And if you have the right levels of permission and the right access, you can get access to those kind of things. And so what we are doing is taking advantage of a very, very small piece of that to build a search engine for this particular client. The business problem that I'm being asked to solve right now is they have a huge knowledge base in the form of PDFs. And they want to be able to take that knowledge base, we're talking tens of thousands of different PDFs, and they want to be able to have kind of a search algorithm of sorts that can not only find metadata that we've used to tag those PDF documents, but also look inside and do a full text search of the PDFs themselves and bring up search results based off of that. And so given those requirements, I thought, well, hey, let's take all of those documents, we'll throw them into SharePoint, because that's where you put everything that nobody ever is going to look at again. And then we can use this Graph API to search those documents, because the Graph API allows you to use SharePoint list metadata as search criteria, as well as doing a full text search for us. So if somebody's already built the technology to solve my problem, I'm just going to use it, right? So that's kind of the high level thing of what we're doing. To make it more applicable to what you guys could do going forward, there is something that Microsoft has called the Graph Explorer. And you can just Google Graph Explorer with Bing or whatever, should bring you to this page right here. And this can give you kind of a really cool example of the different things that you can look at inside Graph. So you notice that it asked me to log in right there. Again, security is a very, very big deal whenever you're coming to these big, you have access to everything sort of situations. And so it wants me to sign in to make sure that I have permissions to be able to look at certain things. And then the other thing, and so for example, if I wanted to look at my profile, if I wanted to see who I was, I could go ask Graph right here in this URL and say, hey, who am I? And it comes back and gives me this information. My display name, my given name, my email address, that kind of stuff all comes from me. Now the interesting thing about this is it's delegated permissions. And the short version of that means that if somebody else were logged in and they went to this exact same endpoint, they would get information about them as opposed to information about me. And so it allows us to build really cool solutions where you can change what your solution looks like or the information that it has based on who is logged in. So for example, I can use this call right here to look into my email box and get my mail. And again, the endpoint doesn't change based on who it is. It's just who is logged in and what sort of access token that you have. So as a developer, I can just go to this one endpoint and know that whoever is logged into SharePoint, I will get their last 10 email messages or most recent 20 email messages, or I could even do a search through their email messages for a specific keyword or something like that. So I could build a single part that they could put into SharePoint that they could type in a search term and go look at all of their emails and return results specific to them. And I don't actually have to know or care who they are, because it's all authenticated through Microsoft. What's the word I'm looking for?
Active Directory.
Not Active Directory. OAuth. There we go. Microsoft OAuth. So how does this apply to you? Most of you here are either are developers or have developers that work for you, and you could come in here as a manager of one of these developers and look at the cool different things that you can get access to from the graph. So this is getting started. This is, I can ask who I am, I can ask where my photo is, I can ask about my mail, I can ask who my manager is. So you can see how, oh, hey, if I can find out who my manager is and then go ask who that person's manager is and then go ask who that person's manager is, suddenly you have something that you can possibly build an org chart with or something along those lines. So one of the sections is Excel right here. You can actually create Excel worksheets on the fly that are authored by that particular person. You can look in worksheets. You can search Excel worksheets for specific formulas and things like that. Groups inside teams is another one. You can create a team through this graph API. You can look at all of the teams that you're a part of. So again, this is one of those, you could create a part that you could put on a home page or a landing page or something that would just pop up and say, here's all of the teams that you're a part of, and here's the last 5 that you wrote a message in or something like that. If people don't really like using the Teams app for whatever, you can make that part of your home page or your org's landing page, something along those lines. So just a whole bunch of different things. You have access to OneDrive, you have access to OneNote, you have access to the Outlook Mail, Outlook Calendar, that kind of a thing. All of this stuff you have access to through the Graph API. Again, this is all very permission-based. There's actually 2 sets of permissions involved in all of these things. One is, what does the application as a whole have access to? And then the other is, what do I as a person have access to? So for example, if we come in here on their Microsoft Teams thing right here, and I want to see, hey, who's the one that was like all of my teams? My joined teams right here. I could go in and ask, hey, what are my joined teams? This tool will tell me, okay, this is the endpoint that you'll go to get that. But then you'll notice that the response I got back is that I'm missing a permission for this request. So that's saying that this Graph Explorer application doesn't have permission to look at teams. So even though I, as Josh, have permission to see what teams I'm in, obviously through the Teams app, Graph Explorer doesn't. So by fiddling the levers of those 2 different types of permissions, what does an application have access to, and then what does the user have access to delegated through the application, you can get some very, very fine control and make sure that people aren't poking around where they're not supposed to be. So that's kind of all background as to the technology that I'm using to kind of come up with this solution, as well as different ways that you could go around and play around with this technology and maybe get the brain juices going on how you could use some of this stuff in your organizations and applications. So a little bit more concrete example, what am I doing specifically? So the first thing that I'm doing inside of my code, so this
you need to warn us before you just throw code up on the screen.
I did. I said this is a little more specific application.
All right, fine.
All right, so those of you who don't care about code at all, you can check out for the next 10 minutes. And for those of you who have working brains, I'm like Kevin over here. So this is a SharePoint framework solution. You'll often see that abbreviated as SPFx. And this particular solution is called Sovereign Salt Lake City Project Central. So I would go in here to this project definition, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add that level of permission that we just kind of talked about a little bit. So I'm going to say that this application is going to access the Microsoft Graph, and it is going to do so with the permission to read all sites. Now for, again, a little bit more of a deep dive as to what that means, I'm going to be specifically accessing the search endpoint of this. And in order to access search, it says, oh, there's a bunch of different places that search can go and look to find answers to things. But in order to do that, you need different sets of permissions. So for example, if I wanted to search your email messages, I would need to make sure that I have mail read or mail write permissions as part of my application. If I wanted to search your calendar events, I would need calendar read, calendar write. You'll notice that the only thing I'm asking for right here is sites read. So my particular application, no matter who's logged into it, will not actually be able to go and look at email messages or calendar events because I haven't specifically asked for those permissions. However, you can see that this sites read all shows up for document libraries, so shows up for folders, pages, shows up for lists, list items, and for sites themselves. So just with that one permission, I'm going to get access to all of these buckets, but I'm not actually going to get access to any of those buckets. So that's fine. I don't think that, again, my particular solution is we're going to put a bunch of documents into SharePoint. They're going to try and find those documents from within SharePoint, so I don't think I actually need access to their calendar or their email, so this works fine for me. So once I've requested those permissions, then when I deploy this solution to a particular tenant, the administrator of that tenant is going to have to go into some magic voodoo backend admin place, and it will tell them straight up, it'll say this sovereign SLC Project Central is requesting access to the graph sites read all. Do you want to approve it or deny it? And hopefully they approve it, because we need approval for that in order for any of this to actually work. Then once we have that approval, we can use it to do fun things. So for example, this is just a blanket search right now. So this is the part where things get a little
Smoke and mirrors.
not smoke and mirrors. It doesn't look pretty. This looks really ugly, right? Because I'm a developer and I don't really care how it looks. I just want to make sure that it works, right? So if we come in here and actually look at this, I'm on a live tenant right here. You can see I'm on a team site called Josh Test on a real live tenant. And I'm just going to do a search in here. And I'm going to throw that into the graph and say, hey, give me everything that has the word test in it. Nope, needs to re-authenticate me. Which is a good thing because, graph is kind of dangerous. It gives you access to lots of stuff. And so I've done that. So you can see that there are some things that it's very obvious why those came back with the word test. It also gives you kind of a ranking on where to find some of these things. So for example, this is something called SLC test. This is a site, and the URL that it can be found at, let's get rid of some of these lines here. The URL that it can be found at is right here. Now you'll notice that this site is not a subsite of where I'm at. I'm actually in Teams sites under Teams Josh Test. This is a site app SLC test. And so I'm not just searching the site that I'm on. I'm not even just searching the site collection that I'm on. As you can see, I'm literally searching every site on this tenant that I have access to. In addition to that, you can see that I'm also finding something that's in this site itself. So there's Teams, Josh Test. In the documents library, there's a file called test.txt. And that's another, that's a pretty good match for the word test because it's literally called test, right? There's another one. Where did it go? Okay. So then once I have all of this data available to me and all of these results, oh, and how did I get that? Throwing code up again, for those of you that need to avert your eyes. I'm creating this request object right here. And you'll actually notice if we go back and look at the Explorer, let's find one that actually works. I love that. I can't find it now. Anyway, you can send a request body along with this. And one of these that I found when I was prepping for this actually filled it out. Search, there we go. Search message. There we go, that's what I'm looking for. So when I do a search, you'll notice that it kind of gives me a hint right here of how to pre-populate the body that's supposed to go along with this. So it's saying, go find entity types, you want messages, go send your query that you're looking for. So this is actually doing the same thing for me, that it's querying the word Contoso. And then down here is the results that I get back as a programmer of everything that has the word Contoso in it. That doesn't mean anything to a whole lot of people, and so we translate that into something that looks a little bit nicer. This doesn't even look all that nice, but
Utilitarian.
This is very useful for me as a programmer as I'm building this. So I've got this little query request right here. I'm sending it to that URL endpoint using the graph client that we get as a SharePoint framework. And then I'm just taking the responses and throwing them out to the screen more or less right here. Now you'll notice that at the top of this, I have some filters that I've kind of put onto that. So for example, if I only want to look for Word documents that have the word test on there, I can throw this in, and now you'll see that every one of the results that come back is going to be a Word document. The way that I handle that is something that's called the KSL. Okay, so what does KSL stand for? Something. Yeah. Kind of syntax language. Yeah, I knew that was going to be that. Anyway. So there's kind of two different kinds of searches that Microsoft gives you access to sort of be able to fill these out. One of them is called the fast search. I think that's the more popular one. This one is called the KSL search language or something like that. And so the way we do that is we actually modify the query term that we have in here. So what we want to kind of send out is, I'll just go look at it in code because I can't remember what it is. File type. So if we wanted to send something like this, we could send file type docx or something like that. And that's how we tell. So this is our total search that we're sending up to Microsoft. We're saying, okay, I want everything that has the word test in it, but I only want these specific file types. So by using Magic Programmer Voodoo, I can add a number of parameters to these. Like I say, I only want Word documents, I only want PDFs, and I only want them that, for example, show up in this particular subsite. Now, it has to be exact. It has to be the full site. So again, as a programmer, you probably wouldn't actually make this a full text field. You'd have a drop list that has a bunch of different sites in it and allow them to search that. But now when I do a search with those parameters, you see that I've got a document, I've got a PDF, and both of them come from this things to know site. And again, just kind of as a demonstration, using the word test isn't very good, but I kind of threw some test data out there, knowing this presentation was coming, so I can search for MUGUT. And an interesting thing is when you look at the results for these, none of these results actually have MUGUT anywhere in them. For example, you go look at the URL for this, there's no MUGUT there. You go look, this is called test. This is a test document in a document library. It doesn't actually have the word MUGUT anywhere in here, anything that we can see. But if I use this link that I put here to go and open it up, you'll notice that the text inside of this text document, I specifically put the word MUGUT, and I had to do this like 2 or 3 hours ago to allow the SharePoint indexer to come in and find it, but it does do a full text search, both of these text documents, of PDF documents, of whatever else. And so that's how it's going to be a good solution for us. People are going to be able to just put their PDFs up there, wait for Microsoft to do a full text index of it, and then come back and give them the results that they want. Also, the reason that some of these other ones show up, if we follow the direct link on there, so this is a SharePoint list item. And if you spend any time in SharePoint, you're kind of familiar with this. So these are the columns associated for the SharePoint list item. And this one, the title actually is MUGUT test. Different one. Obviously, it's going to find the title, but you notice that this one has the description of MUGUT in there. So we're going to essentially take their PDF documents, and when they upload it, we're going to present them with a form that they have to fill out with 6 or 7 different bits of metadata that are going to fill out these columns. We're going to put it in a document library, and then the search that we have will just magically, through the power of SharePoint, find all of these metadata columns, do a full text search, and give us a ranked result of how closely it matches to their search terms. Give them filtering capabilities, and that's what I've been working on for a week.
So it's fair to say that because you're using SPFx, there are certain things that you inherit for free, that the in-text or the in-document search is one you'd have to build your own if you weren't leveraging SPFx in the graph.
If I wasn't leveraging SharePoint.
Yeah.
Putting it in SharePoint itself or OneDrive or any of those other where Microsoft does the full text search, yes, we get that totally for free.
And you get the security model totally for free.
Yep, that's coming from SPFx. So as a programmer, the only line of code I really have to write is give me a graph client. And that actually comes a little bit higher. So I say, give me a client factory, give me a client, and then use that client. Then down here, I just say, use that client to go to this API. And all the OData and OAuth protocols and authentication and everything else that's behind the scenes going on to make sure that's all for free. So you get the code, I get all the authentication for free.
You get documents you own, you get documents that have been shared with you, you get documents from teams where you're a member, or documents from teams that are publicly visible. And again, you get all of that for free. And OneDrive, same idea. So you get all of that security magic by installing that 2-line bit of code because it's SharePoint and the graph and SPFx.
Yep.
And the other thing that you get is you get the viewer to show the results also for free. You don't have to go out and write a viewer to display an Excel or a doc or whatever.
Yeah, so yeah, that direct link, so I have a link to exactly where that item is. So if I do find a Word or doc or something like that, they come in here and find an Excel or something like that, they can just click on it directly from here. And well, okay, so this downloaded the Excel document. But yeah, you could open it up in a new tab and have it present there as well.
Any questions from the peanut gallery? Huh? No. Okay.
My question is, the reference on the web part you're going to put on there.
Yes. So the SharePoint page that I'm building is actually going to have 2 parts to it. One is going to be the form. So there's going to be 2 tabs kind of across the top. It's all going to be on a single page. One of them is going to be the form where they can upload a new document, fill out the metadata or whatever. The other tab is going to be the search that's going to hopefully look a lot better than this, but have very, very similar functionality to this. And that'll just be a web part that they can just literally put on any page in their site that they want.
Cool. All right. I believe that takes us to the end of Josh's presentation. Thank you.
Any questions, discussion, anything else that anybody's interested in? Clear as mud?
Clear as mud. That was very nice. Thank you. Okay, Rusty, we journey north to the land of Wyoming and hand the baton to you.
So I think I'm gonna give mine to you, Kevin, because mine's not SharePoint, and I'd much rather know about Power Automate than Microsoft, cloud configurations. If there's time at the end, I'll be happy to do mine.
I'm good with that. Does anybody else object to that? All right. So Rusty says, I want to defer. That is not the cowboy way, Rusty. And I don't know if you know this, but you're in Wyoming.
I'm happy to give it, but it's definitely not SharePoint, and I'm more interested in SharePoint, Power Platform stuff.
All right. Yesh, I guess that means you're up next. You ready?
Yeah. Hi, Kevin. I'm ready. Thank you. All right. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Yeshwant. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Coming through.
Okay, I'm going to switch to the slideshow mode here. I hope that's a little more better on the visuals. All right, so my name is Yeshwant. I'm a full stack developer with the team at Zact. And we recently tasked with developing the custom conversation bot for one of our clients, which is AFCU in this case. I'm going to walk us through what the use case was and how we kind of went about building this out for AFCU. So moving on to the next slide here. Okay. All right. So that's pretty much it with respect to mostly the business problem, which is where we're kind of tasked with developing a who bot kind of a functionality for AFCU. I'm not too familiar if the folks on this call are familiar with the Microsoft WhoBot, but we kind of had to customize something on the similar grounds, which is where we had to kind of focus on questions mostly relative to AFCU as an organization, which kind of is where I'm going to piggyback on Josh's presentation earlier. So thank you, Josh, for covering that bit on Microsoft Graph, because the bot at the end of the day kind of uses some of the features that Josh initially spoke about, which is questions like who does John, in this case, just an example user, who does John report to, or who are the peers of John, or which building is John located in. And all of this metadata kind of resides as part of the Azure Active Directory, which is then surfaced with the help of the Microsoft Graph in this case. And with respect to AFCU, they wanted a little more streamlined functionality, like looking up the Active Directory. I'm looking for people who are proficient in a certain language, or who are people who are eligible to kind of approve a certain check above a certain amount, and so on and so forth from the functional standpoint. Now, the bot also did have, information to surface up, general company policies or FAQs, which were kind of ingested using the Q&A maker, and then you just would query the bot and then surface up generic information from the company standpoint. As an example, it would kind of be what is the company benefits like, and then the bot would kind of throw out an entire bunch of text with relevant links that would then redirect to the end user to those respective links, rather than trying to look into like an intranet and trying to find that. So you can just ping the bot and get that information right up front with just a couple of pings. So that's pretty much like an overview with respect to the business problem that we are trying to solve for AFCU here, with the provisioning of a custom bot, in conjunction with the features of the Who functionality that is provisioned using the Microsoft Who bot. So this slide here kind of talks about the multiple integration elements that we have kind of used in building out this bot. Number one is it is provisioned as a Microsoft Teams app, which was kind of scaffolded and built out using the Yo Teams generator. This is mostly developer focused with respect to how you kind of scaffold that bot. And the second one is wherein it is integrated with the Q&A maker, which is an offering as part of the Azure Cognitive Services Suite. And the next component is, integration with the Lewis model from Azure Cognitive Services again, which kind of enables and helps the bot, create more of a natural language understanding model, kind of with the human interaction kind of insights there. And the next bit is integration with application insights, which is where we can get real-time insights with respect to how the bot is performing. Queries like which is the most frequently asked question, or query by an end user, or who is the top engaged user on the bot, and so on and so forth. And all of those insights can be built, by feeding or ingesting more log data into application insights as a service on Azure. And the last component here is wherein we have used adaptive cards as the UI element to represent the bot response to a given user query. Now, the adaptive cards could be of multiple kinds, which is, in this case, I've just stated a couple, which is hero cards, or, like sign-in cards and things like that. Those are the cards that are, responsible to kind of give us that UI interaction, like how React does in the web front end. It's basically adaptive cards that are strongly emphasized as Teams perspective of UI representation of responses. The next slide here kind of talks about the overall architecture, which is basically where we have the bot kind of provisioned as part of the Azure bot services, or Azure bot service channel registration here. And this kind of interacts with the app service model, which is where your bot code, all of that Visual Studio Code logic kind of is deployed as a package on a web application as part of the Azure Web App Service. And that service also has like basic web application configuration, entries, which is where it'll kind of hold your secrets to Lewis or secrets to Q&A maker, app insights, so on and so forth. And the channel component here is where you build a bot once and deploy it into multiple platforms. In this case, one platform is the Microsoft Teams platform, and the web chat is kind of like embedding your bot as a web interface into, for example, a SharePoint site or another website that is openly hosted on React or another web application. And Slack is again another platform which is like Teams, as you're all aware. So it kind of gives us the leverage of opening up your bot, which is built basically on the Azure bot services, and you open that up on multiple platforms, which is where the channels come into picture. And you kind of also have an Azure AD app registration, which helps you with the OAuth between the bot and the end user interacting with the bot to kind of reduce that extra login step. But the bot kind of takes care of that OAuth by generating a token and authenticating the user interacting with the bot to kind of give that seamless experience from the end user perspective. We'll save the questions for the end, but if you have anything, please do feel free to interrupt me and kind of we can go over that in detail.
We're really good at the interrupting thing. At least
Okay.
I am.
All right. So kind of since we're kind of short on time to kind of really come up with a live demo here, it was kind of hard. So I kind of put in slides kind of walking us through what the interface would look like once the bot is hosted within Teams and what the current bot is kind of capable on from the user standpoint. In the interest of time is where I'm kind of going to walk you through this real quick with respect to some of the capabilities that the bot can do. The first slide here kind of talks us through, just going back to the graph questions of who works with Pat in this case, like Pat is just a user in the backend whose full name we do not know, but we just put in Pat and then the query goes back to the graph and the graph goes back and says, okay, well, I identify which Pat you're trying to do. Trying to query against, and this is in combination with Lewis in the backend and the Graph API call as well that you kind of interact and work and build a logic of to kind of send that query in the right way to Graph. So then the bot identifies and says, okay, I know you're looking for Patty Fernandez, which is the only Pat I have on the Azure Active Directory, and then surfaces up all the people who work, who work with Patty Fernandez in this case. So you kind of have a collection of 3 people that come up, and then you can kind of choose on each of the individual people, and then kind of choose to interact with them on a one-on-one chat, which is kind of deep linked to the chat UI within Microsoft Teams. Or you could choose to shoot them an email and kind of choose your way of corresponding with this user. So that's like one of the sample use cases there. And what you kind of see as far as the people who work with Patty, like this response from the bot is an adaptive card for Teams, which is where you have the people picker, or in SharePoint, in the SharePoint world, it's the people card, and so and that particular text kind of comes up there, and you can customize that based on your needs. But adaptive cards out of the box kind of supports your circular UI on the profile pictures and so on and so forth. Kind of makes it a little more easier to kind of project that UI there. And the next one is a specific use case for AFCU, which is where they wanted to surface up people who could speak a specific language. And in this case, you ask the bot, who can speak German, and the bot goes back and kind of gives you a collection of users who can speak German as a language. And once you get a user card or an adaptive card, in this case, when you kind of select an individual user, you kind of get this expanded user card that kind of gives you the leverage to chat or meet or email. Now, in this use case, we're going to choose to meet with the particular user because the user seems to be offline, and you kind of want to be able to set up a time between you and Diego in this case, who is the German-speaking user, to kind of get on a quick call or meeting. So the bot is capable enough to, kind of give you back a response that says, when you click on meet, it goes back to the graph endpoint and gives us like a collection of, similar date and times that kind of work for both me as an end user and Diego as the user I want to meet with, using the graph endpoint, which is again internally used, for the find time plugin. If you all kind of used it on Outlook, it's the same kind of plugin more or less that's kind of being used on Graph. So using that endpoint, you kind of get back a common set of date and times that kind of work for both the users in question. And then you get to choose what kind of best time works for you. And clicking on a certain time slot then sends the response back wherein you can capture your meeting details, in this case, your subject and body. And then the end user can shoot to schedule the meeting. Now, once you schedule the meeting, you get back a success response saying your meeting has been scheduled with Diego at a given date and time that you previously have chosen, and you can choose to continue your conversation with the bot. And you can also go back and verify your calendar, which is where there would be an entry created for you at that particular time and date for the particular user.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to do just what I promised and interrupt, only to say that is wicked cool.
What's that, Josh? Sorry, come again.
That is wicked cool. That is a great workflow. I love the way that it uses all the different pieces. The find time bit was really cool.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so that's where the automation process comes into picture in the back end, when the bot goes, kind of does all that auto scheduling for you, rather than you kind of going and trying to look up a time and going through a manual process and things like that. Now, the next thing, one of the other features is where you can, kind of query the bot and say, hey, when is my next meeting with Diego? And that's where the bot comes back with a response with the nearest immediate time of the meeting that you have between you and Diego in this case. And it kind of brings back the response that we previously scheduled for the German meeting, right? So it kind of says your next meeting with Diego is on a given date regarding a given subject. So that's kind of the context there, and the bot can go back and query that and bring that information back to us. So these were some of the features that we kind of built out for AFCU, and this GIF is kind of pre-recorded here that you can see. And this first step kind of approves and authenticates the user, and then you can see a list of features that you can query the bot for, like who is so-and-so person, who does somebody work with, and things like that. And you can kind of see this recording here, which kind of walks through what we individually walk through in each slide prior to this. And you can kind of see those live responses of the bot coming back with respect to each of the user collections and things like that. So I'm going to let this GIF get through here, which is basically considered to be a live demo of the working of the bot, because we don't have a dev working box right now. And since it's going to go on YouTube, to kind of prevent our client, privacy, we don't want to showcase the live version there. So this is where you kind of come back with who can speak German, and you choose Diego in this case, kind of choose meet, and then you get the collection of responses of common date and times that work for both the users. And then you fill in your subject and body, and then you kind of say schedule meeting.
So I have a question while we're watching this.
Sure.
So you said you're using the I can't remember what it was now, something to generate the questions, some Q&A manager or something like that.
Yeah, the Lewis model, Josh.
Yeah, and then the Lewis to do the natural language integration. And my question is on both of those parts, how much maintenance or how hard is the maintenance going forward? Like, you said you had application insights to see who's asking what questions, and if you see a question that is showing up a whole bunch that's not part of your pre-list of questions or something like that, how much time or how hard is it to go in and add a new question? Or if you see that a question is being asked a certain way and Lewis is not doing a good job of interpreting it, how difficult, like just as a general question, what sort of maintenance is there going forward with this to make sure it meets the needs of a specific client?
Well, to kind of answer your question in two parts there, Josh, one would be, so let's say we have a synonym to a certain question, like who am I, who is thy, or whatever it is, like different variations of a certain question. That is pretty straightforward to feed it into Lewis as a machine learning process. So you're gonna have to pick your bunch of questions with similar or close to similar grammatical variations, and you kind of feed that into Lewis and then kind of train it, and then the bot will automatically pick it up. So I would say on the maintenance perspective, that's probably 10 to 15 minutes of, a certain time duration to just feed those variations, the synonyms, and say, this is what I mean when I say type 1, 2, 3, 4, and the bot is going to be pretty straightforward to infer that, okay, you're trying to state a certain question, which is nice and easy to infer. Now, the next part of your question is, in case there's something that's not predefined as part of the existing set of questions, now that would be building out a new feature. Now, depending on the complexity of the question, so let's say you want to feed that feature where you want to get a bunch of M365 groups or a bunch of teams that a certain user is associated with. Now that would be considered a new feature to kind of develop and go and build out that whole feature into the bot. Now I would say that's like pretty much building up an entire feature by itself, and that's going to be pretty close to a couple days to 3 days, depending on the proficiency of the developer and stuff like that. So let's just say that's like an enhancement on the existing bot.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So now that we're kind of done through with this GIF, I'm just going to move to the next slide here, which is a sample of a dashboard that is created using application insights, which kind of gives us, the top intents. Now, the top intents are basically which are the top questions kind of inferred by each user, right? So this is coming in from the Lewis model in the backend. So based on this, dashboard built here, you kind of see that people are more interested in finding which employee works at a certain location, which is kind of asked at 13 number of times here, and who am I, or who is a certain employee is being asked 10 times, and so on and so forth. And the next analytical dashboard here kind of gives you the highest question that is being asked, which is basically who can speak a certain language, or who is a market manager, or who's a manager of home equity, so on and so forth, which are again features that can be inferred using the Azure Active Directory or other metadata attributes as part of the backend system. And the top feature here is again, more a different pie chart representation of our top intents here. And it kind of determine who is the most engaging user with the bot. You kind of can see you're logging each user query against their username and user ID, which is how you can infer who is the top engaging user with the bot. So in this case, it would be Teresa, who is using the bot heavily to kind of query and ask her questions in this case. And again, the graphical representation of which is the most frequent question is kind of built into this bit here. So that's just a quick semi-working demo and kind of what we built for AFCU on the custom conversation bot bit. With that, I kind of open the forum for Q&A, and thanks for this opportunity, Chris, and the MUGUT group to kind of give this and for us to showcase this for the user group.
Super sharp. Yeah. I love the bit at the end where it would show the questions and who is asking the questions. And the number one question is who works at branch name. So as I'm thinking about this as like a product owner, maybe I want to figure out why people are asking who works at a branch to see what information they're looking to do. Are they looking to call somebody that's there right now? Are they looking for other information, right? And so knowing who asked that question tells me who to reach out to and say, when you asked who worked in Davis County, what were you looking for? So that can then make the bot better and more intelligent, or maybe have us choose to surface information in different ways.
Right. Yeah. And also some features kind of build on this is wherein you can kind of automate the support process for a big organization, wherein the end users can just say, I want to submit a ticket for a certain scenario. You have the bot capture that, kind of auto create the ticket in the back end rather than trying to go into like a ServiceNow system and manually doing that process and so on and so forth. So that's something that we have thought through and could be a good use case for future engagements on the bot.
Any questions from those of you online?
Yes, this is Rusty. Can conversation bots do something like what Josh was doing with his to go search out SharePoint files? Is it more oriented towards who versus what?
No, Rusty, we can plug in what Josh was doing, so it could we could do the same thing as part of the bot. You can also limit your responses or even paginate through your responses. So in kind of piggyback on Josh's example there, where you had, search for test files, and then you can also have those filters and all of the same elements that are currently part of the SPFx solution can be built into the bot as well. So you can get back like adaptive cards that show you in a boxed format that you're going to have document 1, document 2, document 3, and with the link to it, and you kind of click on it and it opens up the document by itself. So all of that is completely doable in a bot as well.
That just blows my mind. Wow.
Graph is powerful. It's a lot more powerful than people realize.
Well, it knows so much about you. When you ask it who works with Josh, it's looking at email, it's looking at phone, it's looking at Teams, it's looking at documents, OneDrive, meetings.
I remember one time when Delve was fairly new, the very first time I jumped into Delve, it popped up and said, hey, in this email that you sent to Kevin yesterday, you said you'd have this document done by tomorrow. Here's a reminder that you're supposed to have this document done by such and such a meeting. And that just blew my mind when it said that.
Super powerful. All right. Any other questions? Okay, so Rusty, you deferred, and so I'll show what I have, but it's not going to be nearly as cool as what we have just seen. And so, following the pattern, I work for a company called Nu Skin, but what I'm about to share, I'm not sharing as an official Nu Skin representative. This is just me trying to give back to the community. So don't go and yell at my employer if I say something you don't like. I'm going to find the right window. Okay, so the use case here, Nu Skin has distributors, and if distributors do well enough, they can get recognition. And so we had an opportunity to recognize some distributors as being excellent at what they do, and we wanted to show a picture of the distributor. And they had a web form that would allow that that distributor to fill out their name and their distributorship name, and then upload a photo so that during recognition their photo could be shown on the big screen. So the marketing department had a form that would, a web form that would collect that, and they could email it. But we're talking about thousands of these pictures, and so to go through thousands of pictures, take that email and save it somewhere so that they could later use it in the slideshow would be a pain in the backside. So they came to us and asked for a way to take that email and turn it into a better way. And so here are the emails, and you can see that there's emails that are not related to the event, and you can see that the email as it comes in is pretty much not exactly in an easy format to be used. And so I came up with a script that will put those emails in a web form like this with the picture attached. We also have them dropped into OneDrive. And so I wanted to show that to you. And the thing that I'm hoping to share with you is not that this is a cool script. I'm clicking at it, it's not working. Let's hit refresh. But rather the idea that using a lot of little pieces, you can get something done that isn't necessarily obvious up front. And so here's the script. You can see that it has 4 actions, and we're going to ignore this third action, this send an email. That's something that James, who is the guy that runs this right now on that team, does so that he knows when the script is being run. We'll start with the email arrives in a shared mailbox, and so we've given this user access to this inbox, and it just sits and watches that inbox. And as soon as a message shows up, it sends an email to James to say, hey, we've got one started. And then we parse the fields from the email. And this was something that I thought might be of interest, and we're going to kind of walk through the first one of these to see how this works. And so you'll remember, I have to move the presenting box. You'll remember back here on the email that this text was kind of in a weird way. So this is my attempt to make that text make sense. And so we're going to look for a recognition name start. And so we're looking for, in the body of the email, recognition underscore name. It isn't showing that hover, is it, on the shared screen? Well, that's a bummer.
You
The
do
hover.
a single click on it, it should show it in the expression builder.
Oh, there we go. Good call. So you can see in the expression builder that we're looking for a recognition name, and then we're adding 19 bits to that, 19 positions to that. And then like Josh, I will show the reference guide. So here's all of the expressions that you can use in that expression builder. And then I spent time reading this and learning this. And so you come down here, here's all the different bits and pieces that you can use to build that expression. So I found the beginning place of the distributor name. I then figured out where it ended based on looking for account name, which is the next field.
Curious how you got the ending.
That's how I got the ending, because they're in the same order because they come from a form.
Okay, yeah.
And so because they come from a form, they're always going to be in the same order. The length will change. And so here I went and got the length. So I subtracted the recognition name end from the recognition name start, and that gives me then a decimal value. And so the recognition name then becomes a trim of a substring where I go and say I want to start at recognition name starts and go for this many characters and stuff that into a variable. And so I now have a recognition name. Now, Josh and any true programmer is saying, well, how come you did that in 4 functions or 4 expressions instead of putting it all in one expression? Because you can do that. And the truth of the matter is, I'm a simple folk. And I like simple things that I can look at and understand. And so I broke it out into 4 steps.
No, what any real programmer worth his salt is saying right now is, have you ever heard of regular expressions?
True story as well. and so the point that I'm kind of hoping to drive at is that if you don't know regular expressions, you don't know how to take a formula and nest it to kingdom come, you can still use Power Automate to do a lot of text manipulation bits that you wouldn't think you could normally do. And then I did that to get the account name and the account ID and their email address. Now you will notice that I'm not doing any kind of error correction in here, which is the other thing that Josh is screaming about, is there's no error correction. The truth of the matter is, by the time the email shows up, there's nothing I can do, right? I can't ask them to send another email. I can't ask them to say that their input was not validated. They have to try again. That's a one and done kind of thing. So I just built it to take it, shotgun it against the wall and see what came out. So
number of failures we saw, I'm sure.
Well, and so as we look at, and we'll go back to look at this, as we look at these failures, this one right here is this message. It's the see what's going on across your organization. And it failed because it doesn't have to be the text I'm looking at. And so that is the case, but you will also see other times where it failed because they typed their email address wrong, or they left a field undone. And so in those cases, yeah, it would fail, and there's nothing I can do. And so as we go to save it to SharePoint.
That's where you send another email to James and say, hey, go manually do this one.
And that's exactly right. And if we had a wider monitor, I would be able to see all of this, but you can see here that we have some error conditions where we errored out. And all that error condition does is, as you pointed out, Josh, it sends an email saying, hey, this broke, go fix it. And typically what would happen is we would send to the marketing person, hey, George submitted a form that wasn't right. They would ping George and say, George, do it again. And then they'd be ready to go. And so at least that way we're telling people at some point they got to fix things. So here we are creating an item, and here's the list name. Here's the site that it was in. And these outputs, and I'm going to hover and you won't be able to see, and I don't think I can really show you anything here. But these are the variables that we created later or earlier. So the title, recognition name, account ID, email address, all of that goes into that list. And then we add the attachment. And the attachment is here. No, that's the name of the attachment. The file content is here. And it's a create item. I can't really show you what it does, but it goes out and automatically, for free, because we're using Power Automate, takes the UU encoded attachment or the Bin64 attachment and turns it back into a digital item and then puts it out into the list. And then I saved it to OneDrive as well because it was easier then for the folks building the slideshow to have OneDrive open up and just drag and drop into their presentation. And if it's successful, then James gets an email that he can match up to the one that says we started to know that it worked. If it errors, it sends James a message saying, hey, this blew up and this broke, and so it didn't happen. So if we were to go and test this, and I warned James that he was going to get emails, we do the test, then we'll watch it run through the process. So it took the email, it's parsing the fields, and it's saved to SharePoint. So if you look at the parsing of the fields, you can see that it comes up with a number for where it starts, number for where it ends, the length, and then here's the recognition name. And on this particular instance, because it was a test thing, when we did the email start, we got 225, email end 294. So you're going, whoa, that's like 70 characters for an email. That's a super long email. And it turns out, 69, it turns out that the email has an error because there was stuff that was missing in our test. And so it worked. And so what would then happen is when we tried to send a message back to the distributor saying, okay, we got it, we would get an email back saying, yeah, that didn't work, sorry. So that was yet another way that our lack or our inability to validate input in the form caused the process to error on the back end. So an example of why form validation is so important. Then when you go to look at the save to SharePoint, you can see it created the list item, saved to OneDrive, and it can show you the raw outputs if you want so that you can see the UU encoded text. And if I go to that list, you can see that about a minute ago, it saved it in the list. So the idea here is that even as citizen developers, while we'll never be as cool as Josh is, we still can go in and do text manipulation. We can still get into the nitty gritty of what before Power Automate would have been a custom application and do things using tools that will make life easier for our end users. Questions, comments? Rusty, was that worth deferring for?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it stayed to the theme.
And the question that I'm having as I'm thinking about all the graph stuff that we did is, I know there is a graph connector for Power Automate. So could I use Power Automate to do some of the chatbot type stuff or the form stuff that we did? It wouldn't be nearly as quick or performant, but we might be able to make a form where you could put something in and Power Automate could then go out and leverage the graph and figure it out. I don't know. It was just a thought I had as I was listening to you guys talk.
For like error correction kind of stuff?
No. Just general purpose. I know that there's a graph connector in Power Automate. And so what could I possibly use Power Automate to do, leveraging the graph connector to make a cool application or to make something be useful and functional that wouldn't necessarily require me to write a custom application? And I don't know what that is. That was just the thought that I had as I was listening to you guys chat.
I mean, if all those email addresses that you're getting, and I don't believe they are in your case, but if they were all in an Active Directory or something like that, you could go validate the existence of those emails and pull the picture directly from Active Directory,
Yeah.
rather than having them have to upload something.
If it were an employee based, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. So there's a lot of options maybe that you could leverage Power Automate with the graph. Okay, do you want to share what you've got, Rusty?
I'm happy to. I'm taking us on a totally different tangent here. but I'll be happy to show you what we've been up to here lately. So Microsoft has a cloud configuration which they use to deploy policies out to events. So where you find this Microsoft cloud configuration, we're using in Business Premium and E5 accounts that have Microsoft Endpoint Manager. There's a wizard right here that's deploy Windows 10 and later cloud configurations. And this allows us to take advantage of some Microsoft recommended policies to put into the thing. So I'm just going to kind of pop through the wizard here. So we got.
So, sorry, just so that I'm making sure I'm on the same page. Is this like the group policy editor that used to exist, or
yes, Endpoint Manager works like group policy, but in the cloud. So in the, so it and tends to, if you're running in a hybrid environment, you can have conflicting policies once once it goes on. We're finding out with OneDrive right now. And what it's going to do is it's going to create this series of about 11 policies for. Oh, yeah, I forgot. And when one of the policies that it puts in to the into Intune is the Microsoft Office deploy. So here it typically puts in Teams, and this was one of the first gotchas that we found out is that typically when we're dealing with small businesses, they're running QuickBooks and QuickBooks Enterprise, and QuickBooks before 2019 can't use Office 64-bit. So this deploys 64-bit, but you can also use it to deploy the rest of the Office suite in there. And then we have our group name here. And as you'll see, this really throws in a whole bunch of wonderful little policies. It throws up a security group. It sets up the Office deployment. It deploys Microsoft Edge. I'm a big proponent of Microsoft Edge, but most of my staff is not. There's the security baseline, which is the number one thing that bites most small businesses deploying this, because of Microsoft, is trying to be fairly generic on this. And what we've found out, there's about 11 items that happen to you when you try to use these tools. It also sets up a new new policy for autopilot. It pushes BitLocker out to everybody. The enrollment status page gets updated for for some of the uses, like it turns off the admin user for standard users. We are now shipping our computers directly from Ingram to the user, and the user, when he powers it on, if it's a notebook, he has to make sure that he connects to the Wi-Fi, and then 2 logins later, he's got use of the computers. There's the Edge app. We can use these policies to do things like throw a home button on Edge and a favorites bar on Edge, and set the home button to go to the root of the SharePoint site. These are the things that we're using, probably things that you guys are all taking advantage of now. And it also sets up deployment updates to Windows. So and all of these items here can cause you some heartaches when you're trying to do it. It should have been long enough for it to populate. So the first biggie that happens to people when they're using this tool is under endpoint security and security baselines is the security baselines for Windows 10 and later. And when I go into that and I go to properties, well, there's all these policies, and these are your group policies that you were talking about, Josh. So, and what we've found are things like, oh, darn, Microsoft's going to throw in BitLocker, but every time somebody throws in a USB key, it's going to try and encrypt it. That tends to not work too well in small businesses. There's a under the browser, it throws in a we found that to block the password manager. Well, most small business people are not going to pay for a paid password manager, so they tend to allow their users to take advantage of that.
That's better than the sticky notes on the monitor.
Yeah. So and device lock, what we found here is that to require a particular password on the boot up of the devices can cause users to be locked out of it, and so we tend to turn that one off as well. Then you get down here to Internet Explorer. Oh, what fun this guy is! There are tons of Internet Explorer policies, and the one that gets us the most is, and what we usually do is just do a find and look for trusted. So Microsoft likes to disable Internet Explorer trusted Java permissions. Well, when you do that, QuickBooks doesn't run because QuickBooks still uses Java, on there. So what we've discovered is that when you get down, let's see, this Java zone permissions, we don't want to disable Java. We throw it into low safety, and otherwise QuickBooks doesn't run. There's another one down here in another zone here that we're going to allow it to work as well. Oops, right there.
So
we
Russ,
throw those. Go ahead.
These changes to Internet Explorer, does that also apply to Edge?
Yep. Because Internet Explorer is still running in the background on Windows 10 and greater. So, with these, with allowing the trusted zones to work, if you're going to apply this policy, you definitely want to have that on there. There's another one that, like, if you're working with a CPA firm, they tend to find iframe and XAML tend to become problems. So we go in and do that, and that's just another little search that we've discovered that we want to make sure that the trusted zone for iframe is set to enable.
So
go ahead.
So if you've used this and I'm a new employee and it's bring your own device, can I run to the Costco and buy a laptop and then log into the company tenant and have all this applied, or does it have to be provided from Ingram?
No, if that computer is getting managed by the company, and that's the biggest thing is that when they log into their computers, we set up a set of Active Directory groups that we do. So what we'll do in that case is if they're bringing their own device, the first thing that we're going to do is throw that device is going to come into the personal computer policy. So so this Windows 10 security baseline does not get applied to that user. But if you were in a more secure organization, yeah, you could allow us to, allow Intune to manage that computer.
So when they log in the first time, it has the checkbox that says allow your organization to manage your, and they would have
Exactly.
to click yes.
Yep.
And I assume that you can use this same set of policies to say if you don't check that, you don't get nothing.
Correct. And the if you don't want to be, taking control of their computers, the big thing is that Microsoft by default sets, automatically checks that to allow your organization to manage your computer. So it does secure the organization better if you're using these policies. Let's see. Oh, there's other little things that catch you on these is like, users don't like to walk away from their computer and come back and have to re-log in every 15 minutes. So we tend to up this policy to 60. There's a elevation of privileges, which is right here. This automatically denies elevation of privilege requests. Well, QuickBooks, again, is our nemesis. And then every time they send out an update, QuickBooks wants to have an admin user to push out to update there. So if you don't let this prompt for the credentials, then oops, not that one. Prompt for credentials.
So if you were to roll this out in an org that wasn't currently using it, you'd start with a bunch of test cases and figure out what you were going to break before you send it out org-wide.
Exactly. So what we, again, that's why we create a security group for pilot. And then, it's the TTR, test, and retest. So we're going on there. But this is this happens to be my family tenant, and when you come into the security baselines, you're going to find that it's very easy to manage. So there's an error here, and if I wanted to find out what that error was, I just go down here to the per setting status, and I could look down for the error. Now, okay, so block test notifications. This is a little problem child in this policy that that comes up, but as you can see, it's pretty darn easy to figure out what in the policy is causing that problem. Another thing that I've seen people tend to do in here when I've dealt with other MSPs is they get into the compliance policies, and they'll set up a compliance policy and then set up a conditional access policy that locks or blocks the computer, and that can cause a lot of help desk calls. So you kind of want to test those things.
After 3 unsuccessful logins, format C:/. Yeah.
Exactly.
But what I think is so cool about this stuff is you can tie it all back into SharePoint and everything else. One of the interesting things in SharePoint is you can say that users have different access levels dependent upon if their device is enrolled or not. So you could say a user can't download or print a confidential document unless they are on a configured and managed device. You can also, do it by location and many other things. So there's a lot of ways to kind of bring this back in to the dev side, and it's why so many developers are also having to work with the ops side and back and forth. We get that lovely DevOps model because it is kind of all meshing together at this point.
Huh. Kevin, did you have that in the back of your mind when you were saying, "Hey, Rusty, you can go ahead and do this"?
You're assuming that my mind is functional and that I have more than one brain cell to rub together.
Thanks, thanks, Chris. no, there's some really wonderful things here that it can do, and it's but knowing, you know, this is what catches a lot of my level 1 techs is that they don't consider the group policies in from from Intune or from the servers. They that and we've got them pretty well trained now that it's like escalate. Yeah. So,
Well, and there are so many knobs and dials to be pushed and pulled and twisted that, and you don't know that if I pull this lever here, that 4 other levers in the background move to an off position. It really, and I like your test and retest and test some more acronym. I thought that was great.
yeah, TTR. That's kind of like the first thing that they'll hear them come out of my mouth. There's some wonderful things that it automatically sets up in here though, these policies, like the known folder move. You know, it configures all of this for you to silently sign them into their OneDrive. To silently move their desktop, their documents, and their picture folders to OneDrive.
I will tell you that it's very gratifying to have somebody say my hard drive crashed and I lost all my documents. Be able to say, yeah, you know what, you did. They're in OneDrive.
Yep, they're all there. And the other policy that I get a lot of kick out of is the edge. You can set it up so that it, one of the things when you get a new computer and Edge comes up and it wants you to go through all the Microsoft learnings and everything else. No, you just set this policy up so that when they turn on Edge, it's there. It's just running for them.
Cool.
Yep.
Rusty, that was awesome. Thank you. Wait, we got a clap.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are 3 minutes to turn into pumpkin time. I thank those of you that stuck around clear to the end. And for those of you that were on YouTube, you missed a great meeting. You missed a chance to hang out with Josh Cook in person and live even. Live. He hasn't shaved recently, but he was here.
I shaved down here.
Yeah, there's that.
I just kind of stopped with this one.
We really do look forward to getting feedback as to future topics to cover. Christian dropped one into the chat that we'll talk about at our next planning meeting. But if you have something that you want to share or something you want to learn, let us know, and we will do that. I wanted to thank our partners. Josh is from Sovereign, a local partner. Yesh is from Zact, a local partner, and we're sitting at Journey Team, a local partner. And Rusty, we would call you out as a local partner, but you're clear away up north in Wyoming. So you're our cowboy partner, and we're going to go with that. So we thank our local community for all of their support. And that's it for April. See you all in May.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, team. Thanks,
See ya.
everyone.
See ya. Oh, I just about took the table over.
Turned out to be fairly successful.
Yeah.